full of suffering. Life would be a lot better without pain.
At the time, I thought the same thing. Why are people's lives so painful? Why can't we escape from all the suffering? When I started to believe and understand the truth of God's words, I started to learn the truth. Mankind is corrupt, and there's meaning to all of our suffering.
You believe in God?
In God?
During my very worst times, a friend of mine shared the gospel. He said, God created mankind. God rules over our destiny. Where we come from, where we go, our whole lives are arranged by God. If we believe in God, we'll understand these things about human life. It doesn't matter what difficulties we have, setbacks, or failures in our lives. It's all in God's will. We believe in God and have undergone difficulties. It allows us to see the truth and God's actions, gain God's care and protection, and walk the proper path. As long as we seek the truth and pray, rely on God in all things, God will protect us, care for us. He will give us a way out and resolve all our problems. My friend bore witness to the words and work of God in the last days, and gave me a book of God's words. The Word appears in the flesh. Ever since then, I've read God's words every day and prayed to Him. I shared all of my difficulties with God, and I met brothers and sisters, had fellowship. By that time, I understood. God does carry in His hands the fate of mankind, rule over us, and arrange people's whole lives. We all live with pain every day, because Satan has corrupted us. Humans turned their back on God, and we lost His care and protection, falling under Satan's domain. Satan has fooled mankind. That's why our lives are tragedy. People live only for vanity, for fame and status. It's all Satan's affliction on mankind. Living like this, of course we're in pain. I finally see things clearly. Actually, God allows people to suffer so in order to show mankind how Satan corrupts and afflicts us. This is the only way we can hate and reject Satan, and instead come pray to God, seek to live based on His words, cast off the shackles of sin, and gain God's salvation. This is God's will. All of this was my guidance from the words of God that made me understand the truth and truly know in my heart that God is love, and only God can save all mankind. While believing in God, I've seen His guidance and His protection and His salvation in many things. My heart is brighter. Believing in God is great and is really the right path in life. Almighty God's words very clearly explain the root of people's pain in life. Let's take a look at His words together. Then you'll see.
That sounds great.
Let's read together.
Almighty God says, Adam and Eve, created by God in the beginning, were holy people. Which is to say, whilst in the Garden of Eden, they were holy, untainted with filth. They were also faithful to Jehovah, and knew nothing of the betrayal of Jehovah. This is because they were without the disturbance of the influence of Satan, were without Satan's poison, and were the purest of all mankind. They lived in the Garden of Eden, undefiled by any filth, unpossessed by the flesh, and in reverence of Jehovah. Later, when they were tempted by Satan, they had the poison of the serpent and the desire to betray Jehovah, and they lived under the influence of Satan. His thoughts were filled with evil and filth, without good or holiness. Is this not Satan? Mankind has developed through tens of thousands of years of history to get to where they are today. However, the mankind of my original creation has long ago sunk into degeneracy. They have already ceased to be what I want. And thus humanity, as they appear in my eyes, no longer deserves the name of mankind. They are rather the scum of mankind that Satan has taken captive. The rotten walking corpses that Satan lives in, and in which it is clothed. People do not in the least believe in my existence, nor do they welcome my coming. Satan corrupts people through the education and influence of the national governments and the famous and great. Their lies and nonsense have become man's life and nature. Everyone for himself and the devil take the hindmost is a well-known satanic saying that has been instilled into everyone and become the human life. There are some other words of life philosophy that are also like this. Satan educates people through each nation's fine traditional culture and causes humanity to fall into and be engulfed in an expansive abyss of destruction. And in the end, people are destroyed by God because they serve Satan and resist God.
We should read another part. For many years, the thoughts that people have relied upon for their survival have been corroding their hearts, to the point that they have become treacherous, cowardly, and despicable. Not only do they lack willpower and resolve, but they have also become greedy, arrogant, and willful. They are utterly lacking any resolve that transcends the self. And even more, they don't have a bit of courage to shake off the strictures of these dark influences. People's thoughts and lives are rotten. Their perspectives on believing in God are still unbearably ugly. And even when people speak of their perspectives on belief in God, it is simply unbearable to hear. People are all cowardly, incompetent, despicable, as well as fragile. They do not feel disgust for the forces of darkness, and they do not feel love for the light and the truth. Instead, they do their utmost to expel them. From when man first had social sciences, the mind of man was occupied by science and knowledge. Then science and knowledge became tools for the ruling of mankind, and there was no longer sufficient room for man to worship God, and no more favorable conditions for the worship of God. The position of God sunk ever lower in the heart of man. A world in man's heart with no place for God is dark, empty, without hope. And so arose many social scientists, historians, and politicians to express theories of social science, the theory of human evolution, and other theories that contravene the truth that God created man to fill the heart and mind of man. And in this way, those who believe that God created everything become ever fewer, and those who believe in the theory of evolution become ever greater in number. More and more people treat records of the work of God and His words during the Old Testament age as myths and legends. In their hearts, people become indifferent to the dignity and greatness of God, to the tenet that God exists and holds dominion over all things. The survival of mankind and the fate of countries and nations are no longer important to them. Man lives in a hollow world only concerned with eating, drinking, and the pursuit of pleasure. Wenya, why don't you read next?
Sure. Man walked through the ages with God, yet man knows not that God rules the fate of all things and living beings, or how God orchestrates and directs all things. This is something that has eluded man since time immemorial to the present day. As for the reason why, it is not because the ways of God are too elusive, or because the plan of God has yet to be realized, but because the heart and spirit of man are too distant from God. Therefore, even as man follows God, he unknowingly remains in the service of Satan. None actively seek out the footsteps or appearance of God, and none wish to exist in the care and keeping of God. Rather, they are willing to rely on the corrosion of Satan and the evil one in order to adapt to this world and to the rules of life the wicked mankind follows. At this point, the heart and spirit of man are sacrificed to Satan and become its sustenance. Moreover, the human heart and spirit become a place in which Satan can reside and a fitting playground for it. In this way, man unknowingly loses his understanding of the principles of being human and of the worth and purpose of human existence. The laws from God and the covenant between God and man gradually fade away in man's heart, and man no longer seeks or pays heed to God. As time passes, man no longer understands why God created man, nor does he understand the words that come from the mouth of God, or realize all that is from God. Man begins to resist the laws and decrees from God. The heart and spirit of man become deadened. God loses the man of his original creation, and man loses the root of his beginning. This is the sorrow of this mankind.